I'll tell you some stories tonight about some children that were helped through Agape, like Rachel and Sherry and Bonnie and Julie and Jesse and Jason. And these children that Agape helped are going to be okay. But I'll also tell you about some other children like Bobby, whom Agape had to turn away, and these children probably won't be okay. Now, Agape offers a variety of services. First of all, we work with unwed mothers. Secondly, we're an adoption agency. Number 3, we have a counseling center. And number 4, we're a children's foster care agency. Let me tell you some of our stories. First of all, we work with unwed mothers. Now, last year, from all over Middle Tennessee, there were more than 200 pregnant girls and women who contacted Agape. And after we visited with them, 60 of them chose to become what we call our maternity clients. Now, most of these pregnant girls are in their mid-teens, although some are as young as 12 years old, or as old as 39. Our second area of service at Agape is adoption. Now, last year, Agape was able to place 50 babies and children into new Church of Christ homes. Now, if you were to come to Agape and visit one of our social workers' offices while she's trying to make one of these adoption placements, you would see 2 notebooks sitting on her desk. 2 notebooks. Now, one of the notebooks on her desk, it's filled with information on couples who are waiting for children to adopt. And then the other folder on her desk, well, it's filled with information on children who are waiting to be adopted. Well, why don't we just take these 2 notebooks that are sitting on the social worker's desk, the one with the couples and the one with the children, and just put them together? Why don't we just match all the children in one notebook with couples in the other notebook? Well, here's the problem. You see, those couples that we have in one notebook, they're waiting for babies. And the children we have in the other notebook, well, they're not babies. They're 4, 5, 6 years old and older. Some of them are up to teenagers. So very often, between all these couples we have in one notebook and all the children we have in the other notebook, often we can't make a love connection at Agape. You see, it's a problem of supply and demand. There's a huge demand from hundreds of couples who are waiting for a very small number of available babies. In fact, the ratio is nationwide. For every infant that comes available, there are 41 couples competing for every one infant. So most couples who come to Agape specifically wanting a baby, we tell them to expect an average wait of 2 years. And with other agencies, you could end up waiting twice that long. In fact, last year at Agape, we only had 16 infants available the whole year. Just 16 babies all year. Now, what can make you sick is to realize that just in Tennessee last year alone, there were more than 16,000 abortions. But we at Agape, we only got 16 babies. Now, at the same time, there's a huge supply of children who are waiting for very few parents willing to take them in. So many of these children who are hoping to be adopted and waiting to be adopted, they all say the same thing sooner or later. Eventually, all these kids will make the same statement. Danny says it, and Robert says it, and so does Jennifer, and so does Carol. All these kids from 4 to 16 that we've handled, sooner or later they'll say the same thing. They'll all say, "Nobody wants me. Nobody wants me." Most of these children are living in group homes somewhere in Tennessee. Some of them live in group homes here in Columbia. And the reason we had to refer these children out to a group home is because Agape wasn't able to place them. Now, why is it that Agape wasn't able to place these children? What's wrong with them? What's their crime? Well, their crime is they're not babies. They're not babies anymore. So what do you say to a 6-year-old girl like Carol if Carol walks up to you and Carol says, "Nobody wants me"? How can you respond to that statement? How can you answer Carol? Because after all, it's true. Carol knows it, and you know it too. Nobody wants her. And meanwhile, back at Agape, when the workday comes to an end, the social worker will turn out the light to her office, and she'll shut the door, and she'll go home at the end of the day. And there, left behind on her desk in the dark, sit those 2 notebooks. All those couples waiting for babies, and all those children waiting for parents, in those 2 notebooks lying there on her desk, side by side. The third service from Agape that I'll tell you about tonight is foster care. Did you know that in Tennessee, more than 13,000 children have to live outside their natural home for various reasons? So at Agape, we do what we can to help children like Rachel and Wanda. Rachel was 3 years old and Wanda was 2 when their parents decided to turn them over to foster care. Now, there are children who come to Agape from state custody, but did you know that most children are placed in foster care by their parents? And it's a voluntary thing. And that was the case with Rachel and Wanda. Rachel and Wanda's parents set a date for Agape to come and pick up the girls. And on the night before we were scheduled to pick up Rachel and Wanda, there was a big fight that broke out in their house among the adults. A fight between husband and wife, parents and grandparents and friends and relatives and neighbors who were all visiting in the home. And this wasn't just an argument, it was a brawl. I mean, there were punches thrown and there was wrestling and there was furniture knocked over, and then guns and knives were drawn on each other. And little Rachel and Wanda witnessed this free-for-all drag-out fight among these grown-ups that led to guns and knives. You know, you never saw that sort of thing in the Cleaver home. June and Ward never drew weapons on each other, at least never in front of Wally and the Beaver. Now, Eddie Haskell's parents maybe, but I don't think so. Can you picture that? See, most of us can't even imagine the kind of life that Rachel and Wanda had. But every night, even here in Tennessee, police find children who are surrounded by violence in the home, and those kids need to get into foster care immediately. Now, occasionally, couples will tell us that they're a little afraid. They're afraid of even thinking about being foster parents, even if it's just every once in a while, and even if it's just for a short period of time, like less than a month or less than a week. They're afraid to even think about it because they've got an idea that, well, these kids are put into foster care because, well, aren't they troublemakers? Aren't they? They've got an idea that if they took in one of these foster children, well, the kid might just ransack the house and spray paint the walls and set fire to the dog. But according to state records, only 17% of children placed in foster care have behavioral problems, and Agape does not accept the violently aggressive cases. You see, we mainly work with that majority, that 83%, who are just innocent victims, like Rachel and Wanda. Agape sends financial help to foster parents. It's what we call a monthly board payment check. It's between $260 and $423 a month per child, depending on the child's age. And that monthly check that we send out to foster parents can go as high as $800 a month if you take in a child who has a special problem, like a child who needs psychiatric therapy or a child who needs some kind of ongoing medical care. Well, in addition to that monthly board payment check, Agape also provides a monthly clothing allowance for each child. And now we're even paying a daycare allowance if the parents have to work. And Agape also covers any medical or dental expenses that are over and above what we can get coverage for from TennCare. Well, in addition to that financial help, Agape also provides free psychiatric evaluation and counseling. Counseling for that group of children who still bear emotional scars from their neglect or their abuse. You see, we have 10 therapists at Agape's Christian counseling centers. All of our therapists are licensed, all of them are members of Churches of Christ, and 5 of them have their doctorate degrees. And among other things, our counselors train the parents who choose to work with that group of troubled children. But we also offer general counseling services for adults, like marriage counseling. We counsel adults who are struggling with problems like grief or stress or depression. Agape has conducted more than 7,000 counseling sessions, helping more than 1,000 families. And to make our counseling more convenient for people in the outlying areas, Agape also offers Christian counseling in what we call our satellite offices. And we have a satellite office for Christian counseling here in Columbia. And with this counseling from Agape, our foster children are going to be okay. Let me tell you about Sherry. Sherry's 5 years old, and Sherry seldom had a normal meal. You see, her mother didn't want to cook. So every day she would just toss Sherry a box of ding-dongs for breakfast, and then Keebler cookies for lunch, and then potato chips and Little Debbie peanut bars for dinner. Her mother never saw to it that Sherry brushed her teeth, and she never took her to a dentist. So when we brought Sherry into foster care, Sherry's teeth were brown from malnutrition and vitamin deficiency, and they were peppered with decay all the way down to the nerves. Well, Agape helped arrange major dental work for Sherry, and at 5 years old, Sherry needed 7 crowns plus 7 fillings plus surgery, dental surgery, to repair the nerve and the gum damage. Well, now all that's over with, and Sherry is going to be okay. In fact, now she's proud of what she calls her brand new teeth, and she'll show them to anybody. She'll walk right up to you, even in the middle of a church service, and she'll grin as wide as she can, and she'll go, Bonnie is a cute little 4-year-old girl. One day, Bonnie was sitting in her foster mother's lap, and Bonnie and her foster mother were watching Cinderella on video. Now, in this video that Bonnie and her foster mother are watching, Cinderella is sitting on the floor, and Cinderella is crying in front of her fairy godmother. Cinderella is crying because her wicked stepmother and stepsisters mistreat her. And Cinderella is so sad. Well, as the fairy godmother tries to comfort Cinderella, Bonnie suddenly jumps down from her foster mother's lap, and she runs over to the TV, and she taps her finger on the TV screen, and Bonnie says, "I know who that is. I know who that is." "Well, who is it, sweetie?" And Bonnie said, "That's Cinderella's foster godmother." That's a foster godmother. You know, that is how it must seem to a little child. Like Cinderella's fairy godmother, a foster godmother also rescues children from horrible, unhappy lives and lifts them up out of despair and gives them love and comfort. But the difference is, foster godmothers are real. Julie is 5, and Jesse is 6, and Jason is 8. These brothers and sister, Julie, Jesse, and Jason, were living in decrepit government housing with an alcoholic and drug-addicted mother. The kids said that the mother would take strange men into her bedroom who gave her money when they left for some reason. And often the children weren't fed. Their mother would just abandon them for days while she was off on a drug binge. Well, the State Department of Children's Services took these kids, Julie, Jesse, and Jason, and they asked Agape to find a foster home for them, a foster home willing to take in all 3 of the kids together at once. Well, if you are a foster parent candidate, you know, you've got control. You've got control over the number of children who are placed with you and the type of children who are placed with you. You can specify that maybe you just want a boy, or maybe you just want a girl. You can select which age category that you want. You can pick out a child who needs psychiatric therapy, you can pick out a child who needs medical care, or you can just stipulate that you'll only take a normal, healthy child. You can specify that, hey, I can only handle only one foster child at the most, and even then only for short periods of time, like a few days or a few weeks. Or you could agree to take in a group of 3 long-term, like Julie, Jesse, and Jason. Well, fortunately, Agape did find a foster home that would be willing to take in all 3 of the kids together at once. So on a sunny afternoon, the social worker went to pick up the kids to drive them to their new foster home. Now, they were driving toward a typical 3-bedroom suburban house, and just as she was about to turn into the driveway of the new foster home, the social worker said to the kids sitting in the back seat, "Hey kids, here comes the house." And suddenly, all 3 children screamed, "Whoa!" And the social worker jumped, and she was startled enough to slam on the brake right there in the middle of the street. And she turned around to the back seat to find out what was wrong with the kids. And the kids were saying, "You mean that's the house? We didn't know people lived like that." Oh, the kids were so excited when they went inside. The boys' mouths just dropped open when they were shown their bedroom because it had bunk beds. And then the whites of Julie's eyes went wide when she was shown her room, and she said, "Oh, this is mine? You mean I get this all to myself?" The kids were so excited they didn't sleep at all that first night. Well, in the weeks that followed, the foster parents discovered that the kids were setting aside some food from each meal and then hiding that food in different places throughout the house. They were used to doing that because food was scarce where they came from. So the foster parents had to sit them down and explain, "Look, we won't let you go hungry. You can eat as much or as little as you want for breakfast, and you can trust that you will get lunch. And you don't have to hide part of your lunch somewhere else in the house because you will get to eat again at dinner. We'll always have food for you." For these kids, it was so different to be able to sleep on a mattress that had sheets on it. And they were clean sheets. And more amazing, they got to wear clean clothes every day. One day, the kids said to the foster parents, "You know, everything in this house smells kind of good." Well, Julie, Jesse, and Jason are going to be okay. Last year, their foster parents took them on a vacation to Florida, and we all know what's in Florida. Now let me tell you about the Wilkins, Walter and Linda Wilkins. Walter and Linda Wilkins are the most unusual foster parents that we've ever encountered at Agape. You see, one day, Walter and Linda Wilkins heard the story of Margot. Now, Margot was born a healthy baby, but because she cried, as babies do, to try to stop her crying, her father would beat her, shake her violently, and even threw the infant against the wall. And his abuse resulted in brain damage for Margot. But Walter and Linda Wilkins said, "We'll take Margot." Well, then, Walter and Linda Wilkins heard the story of baby Brent, whose mother used drugs during her pregnancy. As a result, Brent was born with brain damage, and he started having seizures immediately after birth. And his drug addict mother made Brent sleep on a bare mattress with no sheets on it, and he would lay there for days without a diaper change, lying there in his own personal filth in a bedroom surrounded by insects and rats. And Walter and Linda Wilkins said, we'll take Brent too. Well, then Walter and Linda Wilkins took in baby Brian, who suffers from cerebral palsy, and he's blind and he's deaf on top of all that. And then they took in an 8-month-old baby with cerebral palsy named Jessica. And then the Wilkins took in Becky, a 4-year-old girl also with cerebral palsy. And then they took in Steve, a 1-year-old boy born with part of his brain missing. Now, in total, that is 6 handicapped children in all taken in by the Wilkins. 6 of them. Now, I haven't met the Wilkins yet, but when I do, there's one question that I would like to ask this very special couple. Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? What are you, nuts? Why, instead of selecting one of our healthy boys and girls at Agape, why would you instead pick out some needy, helpless child who needs medical attention? And then after you did it once, why would you raise your hand 5 more times after that and say, hey, Agape, we'll take another one? I don't understand Walter and Linda Wilkins. Who are these aliens? What planet are these people from? What would possess someone to do all that? I don't know. But I may have found a clue in James chapter 1, verse 27. James 1:27. It reads like this. Pure religion, faultless in the sight of our God and Father, is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and keep yourself unstained by the world. James 1:27. Pure religion, it's looking after orphans and widows. This is one of those scriptures that you might call a boil-it-down scripture. And we like boil-it-down scriptures. We think, my life is just too busy for daily Bible study, so I'll tell you what, whenever I'm here Sunday, whenever I'm here Wednesday, Bible school teacher, preacher, just give me a summary. Just give me a summary of religion. Condense it all down for me and make it quick and easy and convenient for me. Would you do that? Just give me a summary. So we like it when we find scriptures like this that are scattered throughout the Bible, verses that tend to summarize much of religion for us. You might call them boil-it-down scriptures. And this is one of them, James 1:27. What it does is it gives us a definition of pure religion. But it's a very different definition than what you would expect. Actually, we wouldn't be surprised if James 1:27 instead read, pure religion is perfect church attendance. That's the sort of thing we would expect to find. Or we wouldn't be surprised if it said pure religion is becoming a preacher. Or if it said pure religion is becoming an elder. Or if it said pure religion is becoming a Christian college Bible professor. Those are the kinds of things we would expect in a definition of pure religion. But instead it says pure religion it's looking after orphans and widows. Oftentimes we have what you might call a spiritual inferiority complex, and we think, no matter how I live my life, no matter what I do in my life, I could never be as religious as my preacher. Or I could certainly never be as spiritual as that elder's wife that I knew when I was growing up. Or I could certainly never be as religious as the evangelist who came through here and held our last gospel meeting for us. You see, I could never be as religious as, those kind of folks. But according to this scripture, James 1:27, if you can find some ministry of service, some way to be of service to someone in need, somehow, some way, somewhere, if you can find a ministry of service, then really you are just as religious as any preacher or elder or Bible professor. And in fact, you're in tune with the heart of Jesus, who said in that scripture that was read for us, Mark 9:37, Jesus said, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And I guess Walter and Linda Wilkins must have read all these scriptures that talk about ministry, and they got it, and it sank in. And Walter and Linda Wilkins decided that out of all the different ways out there that they could choose to be of service to someone in need, out of all the ministries of service that they could choose, that this was the one they were going to select, and this was the way they were going to choose to practice: pure religion. I've told you about some of our children who are going to be okay. Now let me tell you about one more child who won't be all right. His name's Bobby. Now Bobby is 3 years old, and Bobby has a single mother, and the single mother has a boyfriend, and the boyfriend doesn't really like Bobby. So at any opportunity, the boyfriend would beat Bobby with a belt, hit him in the face with his fists, and even throw him across the room. And Bobby's mother never stopped him. She said, "Well, I don't want to do anything that would cause me to lose my boyfriend." Well, one night, the boyfriend decided to use the buckle end of his belt to beat Bobby when he wouldn't go to sleep. He used the metal buckle to strike all over Bobby's body and head, and he screamed at him as he struck him with that metal belt buckle, "You will go to sleep when I tell you," striking over and over again with the metal belt buckle. When he finished, Bobby's body and face were covered with lacerations. His face was swollen to almost twice its size, and he still has the scars. Now, the State Department of Children's Services brings children like Bobby to Agape every week, and some of them we do place in new Christian foster homes. But did you know we have to turn away half of them? At Agape, we have to turn away half of the children who are brought to us every week. On average, every week we must say, "No, I'm sorry." Turning away 5 children on average every week, some of them like Bobby, because we just don't have enough foster parent volunteers. At Agape, we do what we can to help children by working with unwed mothers, offering adoption, counseling, and foster care. And since 1967, we've been able to place more than 4,000 children into new Church of Christ homes. And over the years, there are 2 different groups of children that kind of stand out in our minds. 2 different groups of children that we remember over the years. One group of children we remember as the years go by are those children we helped, like Rachel and Sherry and Bonnie and Julie and Jesse and Jason. And these children that Agape helped are going to be okay. But over the years, we also remember a second group of children whom we had to turn away. We had to turn away children like Richie and Susan and Bobby and Billy because we didn't have enough foster parent volunteers. And those children we had to turn away probably won't be okay. And they haunt us to this day. 2 different groups of children we remember over the years, the ones we helped and the ones we turned away. But there's a third group. There's a third group of children, and those are the children whose cases we're working on right now, the children in our current caseload group. And these children we're working with right now are in limbo, and they could go either way. And right now we don't know what we're going to do with Raymond and Terry and Heather and Don and Dina and Kim. Will we find homes for these children, or will we turn them away? Right now I don't know. I can't tell you. But maybe you could tell me. Because really it's up to folks just like you who determine which way these children will go, because it'll all boil down to whether we have enough foster parent volunteers. Now, as I speak at Churches of Christ all over Middle Tennessee, there comes a point where, I want something from you. Is it money? Is it money that we're after at Agape? Well, we do need funding to operate, sure. We do need funding to support our foster parents, but I'm not here to take up a special collection. We're not going to be passing the plate for Agape, and I'm not even here to ask for a special contribution from the church budget. Sure, we do need funding to operate at Agape, but actually most of the funding that helps us support our foster parents actually comes from individuals out there. Individuals who on their own make a small monthly pledge of $25 a month, or a whole lot of folks who pledge $10 a month. And that's easy. Getting folks to make monthly pledges is the easy part. Here's the hard part. What we really need at Agape more than anything else is actually volunteers. More than anything else, we need volunteers who will be foster parents, volunteers who will be adoptive parents, and we also need some couples who will just occasionally take in children every once in a while, just for a few days. Volunteers is what we really need more than anything else.